Let me tell you something about respect. Most people think it is something given to power. It isn't. Respect is given to character. And when someone grows up surrounded by power without learning character, they often confuse protection with permission. That morning, the courtroom was steady. Routine matters. Routine arguments. Routine people hoping today would be better than yesterday. Then she arrived. The police commissioner's daughter. She didn't walk in nervous. She walked in irritated, designer clothes, sharp posture, phone still in hand, expression that said rules were for everyone else. She didn't wait for direction. She moved straight to the front like lines, procedures, and everyone already seated were inconveniences. Even before speaking, she had already told the room who she believed she was. The clerk politely instructed her where to stand. She barely glanced over, then said, "I know where to stand. Tone matters, sometimes more than words, because tone reveals whether a person respects the room they've entered." I was an older judge by then. Long years on the bench. Long enough to know arrogance when it still thinks it looks like confidence. I opened the file, minor charge on paper, disorderly conduct, property damage, nothing extraordinary, but cases are rarely about the charge alone. They are about the person carrying it. I asked for her name for the record. She answered, but with a smirk. Then added, "You probably know my father." That sentence changed the room immediately. Not loudly, but enough. Because everyone understood the message behind it. Not identity, leverage. I looked at her calmly. "Your father is not before this court." A pause. Then I added, "You are." A few heads in the gallery lifted, because boundaries, when spoken clearly, are felt instantly. She rolled her eyes, actually rolled them, then muttered just loud enough. "Unbelievable." The clerk stiffened. The plaintiff across the room looked uncomfortable. And I noticed something important. She was not nervous about the case. She was offended by equality. I proceeded with the matter, asked about the incident. She interrupted before I finished. "This is ridiculous. The officer knew exactly who I was." There it was again. Status as defense, recognition as entitlement. I replied, "Recognition is not a legal argument." She laughed once, short, sharp, disrespectful, then placed both hands on the table and leaned forward. "You people love pretending rules matter." The courtroom froze, because some statements don't merely challenge authority. They insult every person depending on fairness. I closed the file slowly. That sound alone changed the atmosphere. When a judge closes a file mid-hearing, everyone notices. I leaned forward slightly. "Let me be clear." Now even she paused. I continued, "Rules are the only reason the powerless can stand in the same room as the powerful." Silence, heavy and immediate. But she didn't absorb it. People protected too long often mistake wisdom for weakness. She scoffed loudly, then stepped closer than instructed. The bailiff shifted position instantly, professional, measured. She pointed toward the bench. "You don't talk to me like that." That sentence was the real reveal, not anger. Expectation. Expectation that correction should never apply to her. I remained calm. "Take one step back." Simple order. Clear chance. Fair warning. She stared. At me, then did the opposite. One step forward. The bailiff moved again. The room tightened. I spoke more firmly. "Step back now." Instead, she slapped her hand hard against the front rail separating the bench area. The crack echoed across the courtroom. Gasps in the gallery. The clerk stood frozen, and before anyone processed it, she lunged forward, grabbing at papers near the bench in fury. A physical outburst, an assault on the court's order itself. The bailiff moved instantly, but I was already standing, not angry, not rattled, just resolved, and I said the words that changed her expression immediately. "Detain her," for the first time since entering. She looked afraid. The moment I said detain her, the entire courtroom changed, not slowly, instantly, because some words do not create drama, they end it. The bailiff stepped forward with the kind of speed that only comes from training. No panic, no aggression, just controlled action. The commissioner's daughter froze for half a second. That half second mattered. It was the first time all morning she had encountered something she couldn't interrupt. Then came the reaction. "Touch me and you're finished." She shouted it loud enough to hit every wall in the room. Not fear yet, threat. People often reach for threat when they realize authority is slipping away. The bailiff stopped at proper distance and repeated calmly, "Ma'am, place your hands where I can see them." Simple instruction, standard procedure, but standard procedure feels insulting to people who believe they should be exceptions. She backed up one step, not obediently, instinctively, eyes moving between me, the bailiff, and the gallery, searching, not for truth, for rescue. Then she shouted the line she had been waiting to use all day, "Call my father right now." There it was, the final card, not explanation. Not apology, inheritance, a borrowed shield. The courtroom stayed silent. No one moved, because everyone understood something she did not. Names only work where rules are weak. I remained seated, calm, still, and said, "Your father is not a legal procedure." That sentence landed like weight. Her mouth opened slightly. She had expected hesitation, phone calls, whispers, change. Instead, she received structure. She pointed wildly toward the bench. "You have no idea what you're doing." Interesting accusation, usually spoken by people losing control of what they thought was already theirs. The bailiff repeated, "Hands visible, ma'am." She ignored him. Mistake after mistake often happen quickly once the first one goes uncorrected. She turned toward the gallery instead. "Everybody see this? This old man is insane." No one answered. Public humiliation only works when the public joins in. They didn't, because people can sense when a person has crossed from confidence into collapse. I stood slowly. Age teaches something youth often misses. Calm movement can command a room more than shouting ever will. The moment I stood, even she went quiet, not respectful, startled. Because until then, she believed she was forcing reactions. Now she was receiving one. I looked directly at her. "You are confusing patience with weakness." A pause. Then, "That mistake ends now." The room tightened. The bailiff stepped closer, still measured, still professional. She tried another tactic immediately, voice softer. "Urgent. Look, I was upset. Let's just stop this." There it was. The sudden pivot from dominance to negotiation. Very common. When intimidation fails, people often discover reasonableness. "Too late," I answered. "You were given opportunities before consequences." She shook her head rapidly. "No, no, you don't understand who my father is." Again the name, again the shield, again the belief that identity overrides behavior, I replied. "Today, the issue is who you are." Silence, real silence, the kind that exposes people to themselves. Her breathing changed now, faster, shorter, the first real signs of fear, because somewhere inside she finally understood this room might continue without bending. The bailiff extended restraints but did not apply them yet. Visible consequence can be more powerful than immediate consequence. She stared at them, then at me. "You can't embarrass my family like this." That sentence told the truth accidentally. Not concern for conduct, concern for image. I responded. "Your family name was not embarrassed by this court." A pause. "It was brought here by your behavior." Several people in the gallery lowered their eyes, not to hide laughter, to hide recognition, because truth can sting even bystanders. She took one more backward step and hit the council table behind her, trapped now by furniture, rules, and reality. Then came the first tear, quick, angry, unwanted. She wiped it immediately, still trying to preserve posture while losing position. The bailiff waited one final second, professional mercy, a chance to comply. I gave the last instruction, "Place your hands behind your back." And for the first time since she entered the courtroom, she had no words. There is a moment when pride stops speaking, not because it has learned humility, but because reality has taken the microphone. That was the moment now. The courtroom remained completely still as I gave the order. "Place your hands behind your back." She stood frozen, not rebellious this time, not loud, just stunned. Because some people live so long believing limits belong to others that the first boundary feels unreal. The bailiff waited, professional, calm, no grabbing, no rush. Authority does not need panic. She looked at me as if expecting one last reversal, one last chance, one last sign that this was all pressure and no action. There was none. Her voice came out smaller now. "You're serious?" Interesting question. Warnings are often ignored because people mistake calmness for bluffing. I answered simply, "I was serious the first time." That line settled over the room with more force than shouting ever could. She swallowed hard, hands trembling slightly now. Then slowly, very slowly, she moved them behind her back. The gesture was reluctant, mechanical, disbelieving, as if obedience itself were foreign. The bailiff stepped in, guided one wrist gently, and the room heard it. Click. The first cuff. There are sounds people never forget. That is one of them, because metal turns possibility into fact. Her shoulders dropped instantly, not from restraint, from realization. She jerked her head toward the gallery, faces everywhere, watching, witnessing. No one laughing, no one rescuing. Just people seeing the cost of arrogance in real time. Then came the second cuff. Click. Complete. She inhaled sharply, the kind of breath people take when denial finally leaves the body. "This is insane," she whispered. No performance now, no audience voice, just collapse trying to disguise itself as protest. I looked at her steadily. Noah, pause. "This is predictable." That sentence traveled through the room like weight, because it was true. Nothing random had happened here. Every step had a warning before it. Every consequence had a choice before it. She shook her head rapidly. "My father will destroy this place," still reaching for borrowed power. "Even in cuffs," I replied. "Your father may visit, as any citizen may." A pause, "But he will not rewrite what occurred." The bailiff adjusted position beside her, secure, respectful, prepared to escort. She turned slightly toward him. "Please. Just loosen them." Another shift, from commanding strangers to requesting kindness from them. Life can reverse posture quickly. He answered professionally. "They are properly secured. No emotion, no cruelty, procedure." She looked back at me again, eyes wet now. I was upset, true, but incomplete. Many people are upset without attacking order. I said, "Emotion explains behavior." A pause. "It does not excuse it." The clerk, who had stood tense throughout the outburst, finally exhaled. The plaintiff in the earlier matter lowered their gaze. Even those not involved felt the lesson, because courtrooms are full of people carrying private frustrations. Most still choose control. That choice deserves protection. She took one awkward step as the bailiff guided her toward the aisle, then stopped. "Please don't do this in front of everyone." There it was. The fear beneath all arrogance. Public consequence. I answered, "You chose your audience when you created the scene." Her eyes closed briefly. The truth had nowhere left to go but inward. The bailiff resumed guiding her. Heels scraping now instead of clicking. Confidence has a different sound when it's gone. As she passed the first row, no one stared openly. Many looked away, not pity, discomfort, because witnessing someone break can be harder than watching them boast. Halfway to the side gate, she said quietly, almost to herself, "I didn't think this would happen." That was perhaps the most honest sentence she had spoken all day. I replied, "Consequences often arrive exactly where disbelief lives." She didn't answer, couldn't. The bailiff reached the side exit and paused for instruction. I looked across the courtroom, then back to her, and delivered the line people would remember long after the case was forgotten. Status may open doors. A pause. Character decides how you leave them. The room went silent in a new way now, not tense, awed. The bailiff opened the door. She stepped through in cuffs, and the sound of that closing door was quieter than her entrance but far more powerful. The door had barely closed behind her when the courtroom remained suspended in silence, not ordinary silence, the kind that follows impact. People shifted in their seats carefully, as if sudden movement might break whatever lesson had just settled over the room. I reopened the file on the bench, because that is what courts do. They continue. No spectacle lasts longer than procedure. I was about to call the next matter when the side doors at the rear of the courtroom opened again, not loudly, but with purpose. Every head turned. A man entered in full command presence, not because of volume, but because discipline carries its own gravity. The police commissioner, uniform immaculate, expression unreadable, 2 officers remained behind him at respectful distance. He moved forward with measured steps, neither rushed nor theatrical. The room reacted instantly. Some people straightened. Others whispered once, then stopped. The clerk looked toward me, waiting. I did not move. Titles impress many rooms. They do not govern this one. He reached the center aisle and stopped, looked toward the bench, then toward the side exit where his daughter had been taken. The smallest flicker crossed his face. Concern, then gone. He spoke clearly. "Your Honor, I was informed there was an incident involving my daughter. No anger, no demand, no raised voice. Interesting. very different from the person who had invoked his name all morning. I replied calmly. There was misconduct in open court, followed by lawful detention, a pause. He nodded once, not in agreement. In acknowledgement that difference matters, he asked, "May I speak with her?" Reasonable request, professionally stated, no leverage hidden inside it, I answered. You may do so through standard process after these proceedings. Again, no drama, just rules. Some in the gallery expected tension, expected him to insist, expected power to test boundaries. Instead, he remained still. Then asked the question no one anticipated. Was anyone harmed? That changed the room, because concern had shifted away from status. Toward impact, I responded, no physical injury, significant disruption. He lowered his gaze briefly, a private reaction, then looked back up, understood, silence followed. The courtroom was now watching two very different versions of authority standing in the same space. One inherited, one earned. The commissioner glanced toward the gallery, then back to me. If disciplinary paperwork is required for obstruction or disturbance, my office will cooperate fully. A wave moved through the room, not sound, but surprise. Because many expected protection, they heard accountability instead. I studied him for a moment, then said, "Today your office is not on trial." A pause. Only conduct was. He accepted that without defensiveness. Understood, Your Honor. There are moments when dignity appears most clearly, not during praise, during discomfort. The clerk relaxed visibly. Several people in the back exchanged looks. The lesson was evolving now. Power itself was not the issue. How people carried it was. The commissioner then said quietly, "May I offer one statement for the record?" I considered briefly, then nodded. He turned not to me first, but slightly toward the room, toward the witnesses who had seen his daughter invoke his name like a weapon. And he said, "No badge excuses disrespect. Not mine. Not anyone's." That sentence landed harder than anything dramatic could have, because it cut directly through the myth that titles protect character. He turned back to the bench. "Thank you for maintaining order." Simple words. No flattery, recognition of role. I answered, "That is the court's duty." He gave a slight nod, then began to step back. But before he turned fully, I added, "Commissioner." He stopped. I continued. "Your daughter may learn more from today than from years of protection." The room became still again. He held my gaze, then said something almost no one expected. "I hope so. No excuses, no blame shifting, no request for softness, just truth." He exited the same rear doors he entered through, measured, composed, and once they closed, the courtroom remained quiet for several long seconds. Because everyone had just witnessed something rare, real authority refusing to rescue arrogance. I looked down at the docket, then up at the room, and said, "Next case." Voices afterward were lower, postures straighter, attitudes smaller, because now they understood power was never the loudest person in the room. Sometimes, it was the one willing to let consequences stand. The rest of the docket moved differently after that. People approached the bench with quieter voices. Documents were ready. Arguments were shorter. Even those who entered annoyed seemed to notice the room had already made its point. That is the thing about public lessons, they educate more than the person receiving them by late afternoon. The final matter was nearly complete. The gallery had thinned. Sunlight from the high windows had softened into amber lines across the floor. I signed the last order, closed the file, and prepared to adjourn. Then the side door opened again. Heads turned automatically. She stepped back into the courtroom. No handcuffs now, no dramatic entrance, no phone in hand, no sharp expression designed to dominate the room. Just a young woman walking carefully, as though the floor itself deserved respect she had not given it earlier. The change was immediate and visible. Some lessons take years, some take one afternoon. The bailiff accompanied her to the front, then stepped aside. She stood where the clerk had originally instructed her to stand that morning. Interesting detail, growth often begins with small corrections. She looked smaller now, not physically. Ego takes up space. Without it, people appear closer to their true size. Her eyes lifted toward the bench, then lowered again. For the first time all day, she waited to be addressed. I said nothing at first. Silence, once again, did useful work. Then I asked, "Why are you here?" Simple question. No accusation, no invitation, just space for truth. Her voice was quiet. steady but strained to apologize. No one moved. The remaining people in the gallery listened more carefully than they had all day, because apologies offered after consequence are common. Real ones are not, I asked. To whom? She blinked once, surprised, then answered, to the court. I said nothing. She continued on her own, to the clerk, to the bailiff, to everyone I disrupted. A pause. Then, after visible effort, and to you, Your Honor, there it was, not perfect, not polished, but honest enough to matter. She swallowed hard. I thought my last name could carry me anywhere. I thought being connected meant being protected. The room remained still. Truth sounds different from performance. It doesn't rush. It doesn't decorate itself. It arrives plainly. She added, I was wrong. For simple words, harder to say than most speeches, I looked at her for a long moment, then asked, what exactly were you wrong about? Important question, because many people apologize for outcomes, not actions. She answered more quickly this time. I was wrong to threaten people with someone else's position. A pause. Wrong to treat rules like insults. Another pause. Wrong to confuse fear with respect. Now even the clerk looked at her differently, not forgiven automatically, but seen honestly. I nodded once. That is a better beginning than most receive. Her eyes filled, but she held steady. I continued, do you know why today happened? She whispered, because I lost control. I shook my head slightly. No, a pause, because you never learned control. That line landed deeply, not cruelly, accurately. She lowered her eyes, accepted it, and that acceptance meant more than tears would have. I leaned forward slightly. You believed authority meant immunity. A pause. It does not. Then, real authority means higher responsibility, not fewer rules. Several people in the gallery nodded, subtly, because that lesson reaches far beyond courtrooms. She stood straighter, not defensive, listening. I continued. Today embarrassed you. A pause. Good. A flicker crossed the room. I went on before reaction formed. Embarrassment can become bitterness. Or discipline. Then the final choice, which one happens next, is yours. She took in a slow breath, then said quietly, discipline. For the first time that day, I believed her. I signed a final notation regarding the disturbance, then closed the folder. Procedure completed. Lesson still open. I looked at her and gave the last words anyone would remember from that case. Your father's name opened doors for you. A pause. Your own name must now learn to keep them open. The room went silent in that rare way. Silence becomes respect. She nodded once. No tears now, no excuses. Then turned and walked out through the main doors, the same doors she had entered through hours earlier, but not as the same person. I rose. Court is adjourned, and in the stillness that followed, everyone understood. Consequences punish behavior, but sometimes they also begin character.